here in Nairobi or online. We are so pleased to have you. My name is Koko Alida Nadinga, CORAF Knowledge Management Officer, and I'm delighted to be co-moderating this important session with Michael Victor, ILRI Head of Communications and Advocacy and Knowledge Management. Before we proceed, I would like to observe protocol and acknowledge the presence of our distinguished guests. First, we extend our warm appreciation to the Executive Director of AFAS, Dr. Selim Nadi Mohamed. We are also honored to be joined by Mr. Ram Dulipala, the Interim Director of Digital Transformation Accelerator of ILRI. So Michael will now walk us through the objectives and the agenda for our time together. Michael, over to you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Victor. I'm the head of Communications, Advocacy, and Knowledge Management at the International Livestock Research Institute. At the International Livestock Research Institute, and I welcome everyone here. We apologize for the standing room only. We won't be getting many more chairs in, so just try to keep on standing. It's good after lunch to have some exercise. I've been told oftentimes that knowledge management is an old term, but I see a lot of young people in here, and I see a lot of important older people. So I think knowledge management isn't old. It's something that continually comes up and reincarnates itself and evolves. And I think that's what you're going to see today, is how knowledge management and knowledge sharing is really evolving and really playing upon, like, working within the digital space, as well as working with repositories and dealing with kind of how do we kind of structure and manage our knowledge at the African level. So our objectives today is to really kind of see how we're managing knowledge in different ways and getting it out to farmers as well. And because I think we've heard a lot that that's our main, one of the main mandates of CGIAR, of the CODUP XP4 partners, as well as the digital transformation, is how do we really get this information digitally used and available. So I'm going to not spend too much time, but we have an opening by our honored guests. And then we'll have some quick lightning talks, presentations about some examples of what we're doing. And then we have a really great kind of panel session, and we hope to get some discussion and interaction amongst all of you here. And then we'll have a quick wrap up. So it's a quick session, lightning session, and we hope to get on with it. So I'll let Lalita introduce our honored guests.
Thank you, Michael. First, I'm pleased to give the floor to Mr. Ram Dulipala, the Interim Director of the Digital Transformation Accelerator at ILRI, to share his introductory remarks.
Thank you. Just a small correction. So I'm the Interim Director for the Accelerator for CGIAR, not for ILRI. Although I'm an employee of ILRI. Anyway, doesn't matter. Thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen. It's my true privilege to sort of open this session. I just have a few notes, and I won't speak for more than 3 minutes. Look, it all boils down to this, right? So CGIAR might do some cutting edge research. We might produce a lot of great content. Ultimately, if you are not able to transmit this content and sort of internalize the knowledge that we create, right? It's only when knowledge, very often, I think in agriculture, we look at extension in a very linear way. You just think you can do some training programs, you do some capacity building, and it leads to impact, right? Very often, probably that's not the story. The real impact happens only when knowledge is internalized by our constituents. And for that internalization of knowledge to happen, there has to be a co-creation that has to be sort of happened, right? So, and I think today, in this day and age, when digital tools are getting a lot more engaging and a lot more immersive, I think we have a greater opportunity than ever to create genuinely tools and platforms through which you can really co-create content and bring a lot more internalization of knowledge, right? So this is one of my key take-home messages. And the second thing that I sort of wanted to leave this group with, right? See, we all exercise, we all want to build muscle, right? And our muscle have something called as institutional memory, right? In some way, that is body's own knowledge management. For organizations to stay relevant, for us to be fit for purpose, for us to be ready for the next big leap that's going to come in the form of technology, in the form of quantum computing, so on and so forth. Not only should we be looking ahead, but we should have the institutional muscle memory to also do knowledge management, right? It can't be, I can't stress enough on the need for knowledge management. And for sure, in this age of digital networks, in this age of innovation in a more networked economy, it's only through partnerships that you can really co-create knowledge. With that, few thoughts. Thanks a lot. And I think, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Satish, for this opportunity. And I wish you a very pleasant and a great session going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ram. Thank you for your remarks. Now, please join me in welcoming. I don't know if. Okay. I will give the floor to Dr. Selim from the Executive Director of AFAS for the official welcome of the fans.
Yeah, thank you very much. Our apologies for the squeeze in the room, and especially after lunch. I hope it doesn't result in other consequences. But basically, good afternoon. And my presentation is really on the opening on behalf of the whole CADAP XP4. What is CADAP XP4? Okay, it's the institutions, the ecosystem, research and advisory system, which in Africa, that is FARA, AFAS, CADESA, SERECA, CORAF, and most recently, Reform has joined in. And now it is evolving into what they call the ARIS, which they'll explain later on. So distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, like I say, on behalf of the CADAP XP4, which is moving into the ARIS now, I'm really honored to welcome you to this important side event. We are gathering here basically with a shared commitment to harness the power of knowledge, co-creation, and collaborative partnership for digitally empowered cultural revolution in Africa. The knowledge management partnership we are celebrating today is part of the implementation of the broader CGIAR CADAP XP4 or stroke IRIS collaboration, which was formally endorsed during the 8th African Science Week in 2023 in Durban, South Africa. This was as a result of very intense engagement between African Union and one CGIAR facilitated by African Development Bank, FARA, and other partners within Africa. It builds on this strategic alliance to foster joint learning, and the integration of African and global research and innovation system and the agenda. So today's event is not just about conversation and listening, but it's really about collaborative innovation. Following this session, there will be a pre-launch of the IRIS Space, which is a centralized digital repository for knowledge and information products under the IRIS agenda. You can see we are talking of CADAP XP4 and the IRIS. I'm not too sure how familiar we are even with the acronym IRIS. IRIS stands for the African Agricultural Innovation, Agricultural Research, Innovation and Education Institutes. That's what it stands for. Oh, sorry. This was jointly developed with support and lessons and good practices from the CGIAR, and more specifically by ILRI and the team from the ARIS as well. It's a one-stop shop platforms to strengthen the R4D knowledge system by linking communities of practice within the NAS under each of the SROs and including the continental platforms, research and education platform. It is a practical step towards operationalization of a shared knowledge management vision. This is a defining moment as we move from fragmented knowledge silos to an African-led, digitally enabled, and user-centered approach to knowledge management. One that empowers our researchers, extension workers and systems, farmers, and policymakers alike within the nations in Africa. This vast knowledge base within the CGIAR and the agricultural research for development system will feed into the D space. But it will also be made available to the other actors within that ecosystem. And more specifically, the AFAS repository and platform that are being developed with agri support, which is targeting farming system content and other agricultural topics. And these too will be made available to the agricultural extension workers and researchers alike. So finally, we express our heartfelt appreciation to our development partners, more specifically, the European Commission, IFAD, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the CGIAR, AGRA, for their contribution and support. To the KM Working Group, thank you very much. You have done a very good job, and certainly we are proud for you. We can clap for them for this wonderful job in advance, really. And they have worked very tirelessly in the last very many months, and their commitment and resilience is really commendable in driving this process forward. So with those very many few words, again, let me thank you and open this launch and exposure to what is being done or is being planned to be done. Thank you.
We are now moving in. Sorry. We are now moving into the heart of our session. Let me introduce our three speakers who will each deliver a short presentation. So we have Mr. Benjamin Abugri, the Knowledge Management and Cluster Lead at FARA. He will present the KM4XGD framework and aerospace. Ms. Andrea Cardezabal Monsalve, sorry. Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Manager.
Yes,
okay. At CIMIT, will walk us through the ICT for Ag Learning Network. And then we'll have Mr. Satish Nagaraji, ICT for Development Specialist at CIMIT. He will share insight on lifelong learning for farmers. So let's start with Benjamin. So Benjamin, the floor is yours. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity. As mentioned, my name is Benjamin Abugri, and I work for the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, FARA, as the lead specialist for knowledge management, digitalization, and learning. And we are happy to share. I'm speaking on behalf of the Knowledge Management Working Group of the CADEP, now ARI, as my executive director already mentioned. And so I'm speaking on behalf of my colleagues, Bridget, who is not here, Alida, who is here, Ben is with me here, Daniel is over there. And then Michael, who is our point person from the CGIAR. Also, we have a technical team here. Francis is here. Francis is here. Gabriel is here. And Ababakar is here. And they are our tech team. I mean, working with us very closely on all these initiatives. So I'm just going to run through this briefly, and we want to share how we have used partnerships, collaboration to advance knowledge management within the continent as AR for the institutions. So my presentation is going to look at these 3 key areas. There are some of them, I will just run through them because we will definitely share the presentation, but they are for information. And everything that I'm going to be talking about is online also. So you can also find what I say online. First, I would want to highlight what my executive director, Dr. Slim, had mentioned earlier, that as a consortium, the AR4D consortium, which is now called ARI, is made up of very key AR4D institutions in Africa. And this, you can see, is a network of knowledge institutions. And we work closely up to the national level and the last mile stakeholders through a mechanism that employs a principle called subsidiarity. So at the heart of the institutions, we have FARA linking with the sub-regional organizations. You have CORA for West Africa and part of Central Africa, CADESA for SADC region, ASARECA for Eastern part of Central Africa, and NASRO for the Eastern and the Northern Africa region. Together, we work closely with the Africa Forum for Agricultural Advisory Services, as my executive director has already mentioned, and the Pan-Africa Farmers Organization, as well as the RU Forum, that's the Regional Universities Forum of Agriculture. Also, we work with the youth network called YPAT, and so all these are the network members, the Young Professionals for Agricultural Development in Africa, and all of us together reach out to the national research and extension systems. Let's move this. Yeah. So all together as a partnership, we work together with the national systems, and as you can see from my presentation. Now, our stakeholder base is quite diverse. It's very diverse. We work with research, academia, policy, extension, farmers, and private sector, and every institution is playing a key role within this in linking with these stakeholders. We believe in the statement that wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one individual can embrace it. So we work as a network that promotes this. Overall, we reach out to over 14 million stakeholders through our various networks, online and physical. And we follow a knowledge management approach that focuses not just about collecting knowledge, but also connecting people. And as we may all know, knowledge is largely around 2 areas, tacit and explicit. Our focus is more on bridging the gap between the tacit knowledge and the explicit knowledge. So we use the knowledge push-pull principle, where we pull knowledge by initiating initiating activities that promote asking and searching, and we push knowledge by telling and sharing. So with the aim of advancing the gap, or bridging the gap between the tacit and explicit knowledge, as I mentioned. Over the period, and I am using this period not because we started within this period, but we had a reorientation and re-engineered our activities to focus on knowledge management as a major deliverable. And thank you to our leaders who had that vision. And so from 2016, 2017, we had conducted an assessment of the state of knowledge management among the NAS, our 55 NASs, through the Science Agenda for Agriculture Development Initiative. Because of what we found, that led us into developing a knowledge hub that we call the Observatory for African Agriculture. I'll talk about it briefly. But this is a hub that allows us to have a one-stop basket where you can access all the various knowledge platforms of the institutions that I mentioned. Based on that, in 2019, we were able to work with experts, and we develop and publish what we call the data capture strategy. And we came up with what we call the Akosombo integration agenda that was jointly developed and published. Then in 2021, we began implementing a flagship program called the Knowledge Management for Agriculture Development Agenda. I'll give a little details. And it involves a knowledge management challenge and a conference. So we ran an annual knowledge management conference. The last one was held in Kigali last year, and we are working towards the next one in November this year. Based on that, in 2022, 2023, through the same challenge, we worked with the various partners, including the CG, to develop a knowledge management partnership where it was also endorsed by the African Union, who are our authorizing institution. And we endorsed the knowledge management partnership, as my executive director had mentioned, within the bigger framework of the CADEP SP4 CGIAR partnership. Then in 2024, as part of the activities of the framework, we began implementing the ARI space, which we will be talking about it a little, based on lessons that we have learned from ILRI leading the CGIAR in developing the CG space that is currently being used. And we are looking forward to launching this. So today we say we are calling it a pre-launch because we want to just let you know that this is something that is coming up for the continent. Now, in terms of the joint actions within the KM, the Knowledge Management for Agriculture Development Agenda, we are focused on harmonized knowledge management strategies, and I will demonstrate to you how we have been helping institutions, including the NARIs, to work within a harmonized or a synergized framework of knowledge management. We are focusing on digital platform and repositories that communicate with each other, and learning events and communities. So all this is geared towards co-creation and learning, networking and engagement, scaling of innovations, knowledge sharing and transfer within a knowledge management community, so that we can all learn and share from each other. Key examples, and I'm not going to talk about this because all these are also online. We have the Observatory for African Agriculture, and this is a platform that gives you access to all the other platforms that of the institutions that I mentioned. The FARA Data Informs, this is online. And so this is a platform that we are focusing on how to link innovations in Africa. We are focusing on how to use AI, especially recommender systems and interoperability, to advance and to make sure that knowledge is readily available. We have repositioned over the years, and as I mentioned in my initial slide, that we came up with what we call the Akosombo integration agenda, where we identified key areas that we think that when we work together, we can all advance the knowledge management community in Africa. So we identified 7 key areas: knowledge management approaches, integrating knowledge management tools, knowledge resources, knowledge processes, communities of practice, capacity development, with the aim of building an ecosystem of knowledge management. We were able to come up with a framework, and this is a framework that has also been adopted by the African Ministers' Council on Water, AMCAO. UNEP is also currently integrating this. And so we believe that it is beginning to work for the continent. We had also come up with some guidelines on how to capture data for knowledge workers, so that if they are working, they can help in terms of collecting knowledge in order to retain the knowledge within the institutions. We also came up with what we call the Accra Declaration, where we identified 10 thematic areas through a co-creation process on how to implement knowledge management using these thematic areas, whether you are doing fake news and quality information standards, whether you are doing knowledge management excellence program, academic centers for knowledge sciences. So this is something that we have developed, and there are knowledge briefs that accompanies them, and they are online that you can use, and we can also collaborate within it. In terms of knowledge management communities of practice, we also operate a very robust knowledge management community of practice that is focusing on peer learning, outreach, scaling, and co-creation. And the bedrock of it is that when knowledge drops in this community, it should spread across the continent within no time. And these are, through the knowledge management community, knowledge management challenge, we have 77 certified knowledge managers. Yeah, 77 certified knowledge managers in this community, in addition to other knowledge management practitioners. 28 of them are from the National Research Institutes and the NAS. And then we have the CG centers. You have the youth network who have been certified to do the same. And we have built our own internal capacities at the continental and regional levels to be able to implement knowledge management in a collaborative manner. We operate the D group as a community of practice platform. We operate a number of communities in there that includes different topic areas, thematic areas, and geographic areas. And currently, we have over 40,000 communities of practice members operating within this interface. In terms of the partnership with the CG, as I mentioned, we are focusing on research uptake. We are looking at how to ensure that there's an enriched innovation flow and shared platforms and tools. And so as you are here, we are open to engaging with you on tools that you have developed. And so that is what our role is to help in scaling proven innovations. Now, the last one that I want to talk about is the RE space, working closely, focusing on data integration, analytics, and dashboards, focusing on how to add value to decision makers and our stakeholders, and working closely with ILRI on behalf of the CGIAR to provide us with technical support to implement the RE space within the all the institutions I mentioned have their communities within this space. And so we are looking forward to working closely with any stakeholder. The aim is to ensure that the last mile have access to strategic knowledge products. Finally, and to conclude, the power of co-creation and collaboration is at the center of this digital transformation. Without a very good and robust, trustworthy network, we will not be able to scale digital initiatives. So we are focused on enhancing local ownership, facilitating adaptive learning, and building sustainable systems. I therefore want to call to action on 3 key things that we need to all work together in investing in interoperable knowledge management systems, scale up capacities for evidence and informed decision-making, and institutionalize communities of practice. We have seen the benefits of this. And so we want to just let you know that our doors are open as the network of scaling institutions, knowledge institutions, to collaborate and to work with you in scaling innovations that are available anywhere within the continent. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Asante.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Now, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Andrea.
Okay. This is your Andrea.
Yes. Shall I move there?
Yeah.
I can do. Can you hear me well? Or do I have to? No, you can hear me. I have to sit down. Right, thank you very much. Thank you for bearing with us still. So I'll be quick. I'm Andrea Gardezaval. I lead digital innovation and monitoring evaluation, digital monitoring and evaluation in CIMIT. And we have been working for a while in understanding how to really translate, and that's that word, I don't know if it's correctly used, but how do we actually bring the real knowledge that we have, the fresh knowledge, you know, these nature papers that we're reading every day, to the farmers? Can we do that? And what does it take, right? What does it really take to understand what the farmers need, how we do to invest on it? So based on that, I'll talk about one of our strategies that is basically focusing on collaboration. What we found is that collaboration is not always there. We always talk about collaboration, and collaborating is not really easy. So, sorry about that. So can we go to the first slide? So we know there is a digital divide, we know weak information systems, and we know limited infrastructure is everywhere within our countries. And we also know there is a digital opportunity. We talk about that. We've been talking about for 15 years, actually, that's not new. We've been talking about digital opportunities for quite a while. And maybe we can agree here that we have not made it yet, right? Digital has not reached the way we would like to, or digital has not achieved what we were told it was going to achieve, right? We were told with digital, the red button you push, you'll get every single farmer having access to every single piece of information that we have. It has not happened. So the next one, please. And we all talk about collaboration. Many times we say has not happened because we're not collaborating, we're working in silos, we're not talking among each other. That might be one of the reasons why. And then when we've held these conferences about what we do, how we're doing, what we're not achieving, one attendant said once, we say collaboration is key, but most of it happens in disconnected emails and random meetings. So sometimes we get to meet in person, which is fantastic. We talk a lot about what we know. Sometimes we move forward. Sometimes we really connect with somebody and then we move forward. But if that doesn't happen, or we would need to connect without seeing each other, it's very difficult, right? It's very difficult. We all have many, things to do, busy lives, and getting a new thing done on top of everything is very difficult. Can we go to the next one? So we had this idea of, along with the ICT for Ag conference that we were holding. This is all fostered by the Digital Innovation Initiative within the CGIAR that was operating for the last 3 years. So we had the ICT for Ag conference, and we were meeting in person, but we thought we need beyond that, beyond meeting in person, we need a space for that. So we call it the Learning Network, and it's basically a digital collaborative platform aiming to have a space to do that I'm saying, to provide opportunities to keep the conversation going, to meet people, to learn about others, and to also be able to capture the different layers of a network. Networks are very complex, are complex systems. And normally our brains are able to understand those complex systems, but we're not very good at making those tangible. So what we were trying here is to have a space and a methodology to make these networks tangible. Can we go to the next one? So this is the ICT for Ag Learning Network. That doesn't mean that ICT for Ag is the only topic we can work on these platforms. ICT for Ag was one of them. And it has 4 main functionalities. We have a collaborative space, we have an innovation showcase, Mentors Connect, and AgriTutor Academy. So collaborative space mainly to try to simulate the opportunities that you have at a conference, where you can actually meet people, network, understand who's doing what, joining conversations, listening to others, attending webinars. Innovation showcase, if you have an innovation, you have a space here like a booth to kind of show everyone what you're doing. Mentors Connect is basically, we know a lot about many things. Each of us has something to offer. So each of us could be a mentor. Each of us could be a mentee as well. So having these opportunity of registering as mentors or accessing people, accessing their calendars and asking for a meeting, 1 hour conversation about a concrete topic, you have that opportunity there. And AgriTutor Academy, Satish is going to talk a lot more about that, but I'll talk in a minute. Can you go to the next one, please? So this is how the collaborative looks like. You can create your own collaborative space. You can lead it. You can title it. So it's kind of a self-service platform. And at this point in time, and we designed this for communities of practice mainly. So we had this experience about GIS, community of practice within CGIAR, that has been going on for years. And they basically work by email, Teams channels sometimes, WhatsApp channels. But we thought, okay, there are already communities of practice and we need a space to make these tangible. So at this point in time, we have a scaling community of practice, which is very active. They're having their webinars every 2 weeks. They're actually communicating within the platform, which is very interesting because it makes sense. It means that we're actually needing that, like the demand is there. And that also the type that the way that we have designed this, which is an iterative way, we have gone to the users, come back, gone to users and come back, it's helping. Human-centered design is another community, high frequency monitoring systems, GIS, and many others. Can we go to the next one, please? So this is how the other sections look like. On the left, you see the innovation showcase. You can click on each of the innovations, and each innovation gets a website or a space virtually to show what you have, put up your links, give your information there. And on the right, you have the WhatsApp Academy. So we also found there is a lot of online content, but not many people access to it because of many reasons. One of them is we don't have enough time to sit in a computer with internet connection to spend watching videos, long videos. So we created this format, which is short videos through WhatsApp. We have been working actually with MSZRF as well on developing content. So the model, Satish is going to talk about it. But basically, this is to put online content or existing content into the platform, so as a resource, but also thinking about how to make that content used, right? So we're not only putting things out without thinking about the users. Can we go to the next one? This is some of the numbers we have. We started last year in March, so it's been a year now. We could have done a lot better, and I'm going to talk about that in terms of the numbers. However, we have very interesting examples on how collaboration happens. Can we go to the next one in terms of what we found collaboration looks like? Again, collaboration is a high-level word. We don't know what it means. But because of this year of experience, I can tell you that collaboration means joining, writing joint proposals, for instance. So you meet someone because you find a funding opportunity, but you need a local partner, or the other way around, you need an international organization, and you meet there in the platform, and you write a proposal together. That's a way. Linking startups among themselves so they can complement their services on the ground, or innovations complementing innovations as well. Sharing content. So many of us have content on maize, for instance, for a particular region. What we need now is to integrate content to hyper localize our advisory services. So we need local content, and that local content is among all of us, but we need that integrated so AI can actually help, right? So that's another way, using GenAI, as I was saying. So on top of that integration of content, we can put the GenAI, and we also have a service within the learning network, which is an LLM, large language model, that has been trained with these local content to answer digital agriculture questions, basically. Co-creating courses and training materials, and peer learning via mentors. Can we go to the next one? So what we have learned, yes, mentorship works. It works more than we could think, because people is willing to give 1 hour, 2 hours of their time to help. However, incentives need to be clear. So we need something about recognition, recognizing people that is doing mentorship, and also communicating the fact that anybody can be a mentor. You don't need to be like a senior scientist to be a mentor and a mentee before that, no? Anybody can be a mentor. Also, people are open to giving 1 or 2 hours a week, even people for collaborating, but they were asking eagerly for help with the logistics, articulating the conversations. You guys set up the conversations about one topic, and I'll join, and I'll put all my effort and my time in that hour, but don't ask me to schedule the meeting, do the logistics, and then follow up, and then do the meeting notes. Don't ask me that. And then time is scarce, of course, so lighter formats work very well. So asynchronized opportunities to collaborate work very well, but you need a centralized unit to organize these things, to strategically think, okay, we need to talk about Gen AI. For instance, one hot topic now is using chatbots and generative AI for advisory services. We need a community around that, but we need a strategic team, task force, to organize that conversation. No, just one before, please. And another format that works very well is meetings that are in-person meetings, but for small teams as well. So that's also possible, like task forces or workshops for writing proposals, or workshops for writing opinion papers and so on. The next one, please. So what's next for us? We want to onboard more communities of practice and innovation. So if you have a community of practice that you're not knowing really well how to move on, please contact us, or an innovation that you would like to be shown in this portal. We will launch multilingual things. We're very, very focused on hyper-localizing and attending the local communities. So English is not always helpful, right? So yeah, translating using local languages is very important for us. We really want to explore more the mentorship. Mentorship is something, it's a good strategy actually, but we need to explore it more. Track knowledge flows with better analytics, of course, and pilot flexible engagement formats. As I said, we want to test and validate other ways of engaging to achieving collaboration. So that's it, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Andrea. Before moving to the next presenter, we would like to recognize our participant online. Feel free, if you have questions, you can write it on the chat, and then we will read it for you. And or if you want to, we will have a discussion session. So feel free to write on the chat. Now we'll move to Mr. Satish for his presentation.
If people, we have a Menti just to capture some thoughts and ideas from people, and you can take a picture of this, of the QR code, or you can go to 75126549. We'll come back to this in a second, but I just wanted to allow people. There you go. But yeah, if you say I just go to the mic.
Okay. 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 Good afternoon, and thank you and apologies for this kind of a scenario where we are making everybody to stand, but unfortunately, that's how we're left with. Anyway, okay. So this group, right? I mean, this conference, this event itself is a learning event for most of us in terms of to share ideas, knowledge, and kind of we come together and learn. And I'm sure, like for any professional who have kind of in any area within agriculture, outside agriculture, they do have opportunities to learn beyond their formal education trainings and things. But for farmers, it's kind of a question mark. I mean, we do have trainings, we do have extension services going to the farmers, building the skills and things, but how effective it is and how feasible in terms of time and resources that we could kind of do with them, right? I mean, that's a question mark. So keeping that as premise, we wanted to kind of work on something which is called lifelong learning for farmers, where like it's a continuous learning process for farmers. And we thought to have the knowledge imparted to farmers directly in their hands, and it could be easily internalized for them. That's all we kind of got into this concept. And so this platform, which Andrea was just mentioning, the ICT for Ag Learning Network, within that platform, we have this academy called AgroTutor Academy, which is basically kind of imagine a Coursera or an edX for agriculture knowledge, primarily for targeting farmers and extension workers, what we could call them as not the last mile, but they are the first mile. So like for them. So it's a delivery channel for them in terms of where different organizations, partners could come together and host their knowledge content as micro and bite-sized courses, which could be delivered to farmers or extension workers through WhatsApp as a mechanism, right? So that's how. And as you know, I mean, there are a lot of educational channels, e-learning platforms that are already available, okay, right? But if you look at the research, it clearly states there are a lot of problems with that. One is in terms of most of these e-learning platforms are difficult to kind of handle or navigate, especially for the extension workers and the farmers. And then most of these platforms are based in English, which is also difficult in terms of for many of the first mile stakeholders that we are talking about. And also the design of the platform is very disconnected from the reality, and existing platform often kind of are not scalable. That's another issue. I mean, right. I mean, you have one platform, then you have multiple of platforms, which kind of this thing. So we want to have one scalable platform, okay, which could bring in the stakeholders, their knowledge, their content into the platform, and they could use the platform to disseminate to their own hyper-localized groups and communities through WhatsApp. So that's the whole idea of this platform. And if you look at it, so this is the Agro Tutor Academy. So this is technically on the back end of this is based or housed within the ICT for Ag Learning Network platform, but the interface for the farmers or the learners is actually WhatsApp. Okay. So this platform was also kind of launched along with the ICT for Ag Learning Network last year. And the idea is like any organization, I mean any organization which is working in agriculture, who has content, localized content, and want to kind of reach out to their farmer communities or extension staff or any other people or any other stakeholders, okay, and want to use WhatsApp as a medium, they could use it. It's not a WhatsApp group, but it is actually a learning management system. So if you have gone to Coursera or edX, or even these days with the LinkedIn learning things, what you do there will be able to be done through WhatsApp by the farmers. And it's kind of, we kind of looked at the literacy levels or digital literacy levels of the farmers as well in terms of how they could operate. So we have made it very simple in terms of like just next previous click. So nothing to type or nothing to of that sort. That's one thing. And the second thing, why WhatsApp? I mean that's a question that many people ask. Okay, right? I'm sure like most of these apps that I'm sure like I just give a kind of a teaser kind of a thing. If you take your mobile phones and look at the number of apps that you have installed, I'm sure like almost 30 to 40% of those apps are things that you don't use or you don't go back. You install on an excitement or something, but after that you forget after 2 weeks, right? And what happens is automatically after a point of time, your mobile phone flushes out those apps in terms of space, and especially in rural communities where they have much more affordable or cheaper phones. It kind of flushes out, the space runs out very easily. So they have to kind of uninstall. So, and the first apps that they get uninstalled is some of these apps which they don't use, right? So we thought, okay, we should have something which is, they have it every day and as part of their thing. And the learning curve in WhatsApp is very simple. I mean, you don't have to kind of give them a login, ask them an OTP, ask them something which they need to, remember. I'm sure like even all of us have issues of remembering passwords and OTPs, right? So all those things. So that's why we thought, okay, let's use something which already farmers or the extension workers already have it, and they can kind of just go and do that. Okay. And in terms of that also, doing that also, they kind of I've seen people on WhatsApp just scrolling down, right? And imagine they get a pop-up or they get a course reminder at some point of time, and if they are at leisure, they could kind of do the course, and they have done it, and there's some evidences on that as well. So that's why we kind of strongly thought, let's use WhatsApp as a delivery channel. Okay, but in some countries, for example, Ethiopia, Telegram could be a channel which is more popular than WhatsApp. So likewise, the delivery channel could be one of these fast messaging services, but the backend is a solid learning management system which allows you to host the course in a very structured manner with question and answers, with evaluations, with certification as well. So farmers do get to kind of what you call take a course module wise. After each module, they could have question and answers, and they respond to the question and answers just by click or looking at the images. And they do get a certificate if they have cleared the thing. I mean, what you call the evaluation criteria. So that, and those evaluation criteria can also be set by the host organization, the course hosting organization itself. So we are just enabling platform, but the different organizations kind of do host it. So yeah, and this is not a WhatsApp group, by the way, because when we talk about WhatsApp, people think it's a WhatsApp group. There's a one-on-one bot which is kind of interacting directly with the farmer to kind of do that. So this is how the interface looks like. For example, this is one course which is, this is the first course that we add external to which is the MS Swaminathan Foundation, which is based out of India. And Dr. Soumya, the chairperson of the foundation, is also here. So this is the front end. On the left-hand side, you could see the front end in terms of the learning management system, how the MSSRF would manage the course and everything. But this is the right-hand side. You can kind of see the examples of screenshots of 3 different screenshots, which kind of tells how the course content itself is getting delivered. You have the chapters, you can have audio, you can have video, you can have graphics, all embedded in this. And you can see like there's an audio which is there. And here you have the question and answer, like it comes, there are options, you can choose the radio button kind of to select, and that's how the evaluation is done. And this is like, so this is one example, and you can see the button there with blue color there. It's kind of says like the previous chapter or the next chapter, and people could kind of intuitively touch and kind of go through that. I think I covered most of this. And one of the key things is it can be used in any language. I mean, so far we have kind of, for whichever language we have, what you call the Unicode script, we could use it. Okay, which means language is not a barrier. And since it is going to have audio and video, it's very easy to kind of put demonstration-based content in that, which could help farmers or the last mile or the first mile stakeholders and actors to kind of really engage into that and kind of do that. And in many cases, yeah, and we don't need separate apps. And one important thing is we also are able to track how the learning speed is. For example, I'm a learner, okay, and for example, I have subscribed to a course from MSSRF, and I have started like done with like 3 of the 5 modules. And after the 3rd module, if I have not shown interest or not come back, I have the learning management system at the back end, which can kind of telling Satish has completed the 3rd module, 4th module is not yet done. And MSSRF could kind of send a reminder, hey Satish, like what's happening with you? So those kind of things actually helped in kind of tracking. So you have a kind of complete in terms of data, in terms of within how many hours or how many days the learners are completing their courses once they have enrolled, and whether they are doing it or whether they're not doing it and everything. So that's an important thing where you can be able to track and remind people to kind of get the course completed. Yeah. So those are some of the courses. Yeah, some of the key features, which is, I just explained most of them, which is like user-friendly interfaces, comprehensive courses, efficient user management. So you can kind of, so you don't need any technical skills to operate this learning management system platform. So anybody, I mean, with a limited training, maybe like a 2 hours training from our team, okay, would be able to kind of use this platform to kind of enroll people, go through it, okay, and also continue tracking the whole course, completely manage the whole course with a digital certificate as well. So all this thing is completed, and you have also get the learning analytics as well. So how do we do it? For example, if one of you here who's interested to do a course, what are the next steps, right? I mean, you have the course, you have the content and everything, but how do you go about it? So one is like we kind of what we say is knowledge, I mean, onboarding the knowledge partners. So we have some, we also help you in terms of to develop courses as well. Okay, but we kind of leave that to you, but we kind of support in terms of developing courses. So we help you with the didactic plans, we will help you with the instructional design in terms of how the course could look like and how you can kind of split the huge modules into bite-sized smaller things so that like farmers are able to easily download and those kind of things. So we do help with that, and then we help you with the course structuring in terms of breaking them into modules and kind of ideation, and then and then we roll out the courses. We help you with the database creation of the course learners and everything, and then we roll out the courses, and then we announce it, and then we help you in terms of tracking the analytics of the learners and the certificates and so on and so forth. Yeah, let me speak about some impacts. I mean, even though it's like just a year old, I mean, I seriously was super thrilled to kind of have some of the stories seen myself. Okay, one of the things is not here, but so when this was launched, as we kind of follow the human-centric design process, okay, we have kind of already we interacted with some of the stakeholders while we were designing this, and everything has been done. But once the first course was launched, I did visit the field to kind of understand from some of the learners who have done the certification. And there was this girl, I would say, I mean, who was just got married and like she had a baby, okay, a very young person. And she said like, this was a course that was on organic manure preparing, which is called Panchkavya and Tamil. And this is a course that MS Swaminathan Foundation had potentially added. So this girl, I mean, I asked like, how much time did you take to finish the course? She said, I took 3 hours to finish the course. I was like surprised, 3 hours in a stretch to finish the course. Yes, what happened? She said, I had a baby and I was still having the baby on my hands, carrying her. And I was just looking at something came up. It just popped up. I just said next. And it gave me some information. I said like, what's next? Next, next, next. And 3 hours was over. And I finished I finished the course and I got my certificate. And she just stepped out of the room and she went to her in-laws to kind of say that like she has completed a course on Panchkavya, the organic manure preparing, and the in-law got a bit upset. Reason because the in-law, who is an old farmer, had been kind of doing this organic manure preparation for ages and has been kind of telling to several other farmers. But this person who's in the house was not interested in farming at all, now comes and says, I know how to make organic manure. And then this is a classic. And then from that point of time onwards, this person have started going to farms, helping the in-laws. I think this is where we kind of talking about when we talk about attracting youth to agriculture. And this is a classic example which I have seen and heard, right? So this is one example in terms of what digital technologies could do, whether it's a high-tech technology, whether it's a low-tech, that doesn't matter, but how once you enable access to information to the last mile or the first mile actors, how things could transform, right? And there's one more example in the same from the same course, which is basically this person, Vasmati. She kind of, attended an in-person course at the foundation, and then she also kind of enrolled to the online course as well, the WhatsApp-based course. And then she kind of started preparing the manuals, and she kind of felt this was very helpful for her to kind of immediately to refer if there's any questions or doubts and everything. And she became an entrepreneur where she started preparing this manure and selling back to other farmers through the foundation. So she has become an entrepreneur, which is also like interesting case. So likewise, like we have some interesting cases, and what we have done within the 1 year, right? I mean, AI is everywhere, right? In everybody's life, AI is there. So what we have done is we have also integrated artificial intelligence in this, whereby farmers, if they have, the learners, if they have any questions within the course, they could ask a question and they could get a response generated through the AI based on only this content, based on the syllabus of your content or the course material of your content, they could get a response from that, which is AI integrated as well now, right? So that is also there. And this is a catalog of some 20 WhatsApp courses that we have in the last 1 year in different 5 languages. And I invite you all, whoever is interested, to kind of come be a host, be a partner to the in the platform, so that like we can take the lifelong learning as a journey together. Thank you. And you can scan the QR code if you want to kind of.
Thank you so much, Mr. Satish. So we'd like to take just a few minutes for a quick interaction and reflection. So we would love to hear from you, whether you are here or online. You can use menti.com and enter the code that Michael was talking about, and you will see on the screen. We have some questions.
So while we're going to take a couple minutes, and then we'll have a quick, we're going to take a couple of minutes with the Menti and then come back to the panel discussion that we're going to have. But are there any quick questions to the panelists? Any clarifying questions? So if you're using the Menti, it would also be like, we'd like to, what was missing? What questions do you still have? I use the microphone.
just one quick question. You said that the students, if you will, can ask questions. Do they get a response immediately or they have to wait, or how does that work?
No.
The WhatsApp.
Use Satish.
Since this is AI generated, the content is there, so immediately they could get it. So, yeah.
Other quick comments or
Yeah,
clarifications?
I had a question on the learning platform. Very interesting presentation, but I had a question on the languages. Is it just in English or the knowledge management platform for Africa? Yes, network for Africa.
Okay.
Oh, so yeah, Ben?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so in terms of languages, we at a continental level, we are expected to focus on the 5 key African Union languages. But at the moment, due to constraints, we are focusing more on English, French, because that's quite dominant. And then we encourage our local stakeholders to maybe take on board the other ones. At the sub-regional level, they are also, the regional offices are also focusing on a bit more. Some have Portuguese in addition. And so we are working around it. There are some documents that we're able to do all the 5, but some of them we focus on just the 2, English and French. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Yourself. Is there anybody online?
Hi everyone. Hi.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
I'm David 82. My question was on the costs of the WhatsApp platform, and also once when generating the answers, does it generate in the local language or in English alone?
Okay, the cost of the WhatsApp platform, it's not free. Because WhatsApp as a service for end users, it's free. Okay, but when you use that API services to do this, they charge very minimal. I would say it's very minimal. For a course, it ranges between somewhere around I would say less than $1, because the way the charge is very usage based, where if specific message goes to a learner and within 24 hours, if the learner is finishing the course, it's charged as one session, which is less than like 30 cents or something, or 10 cents, sorry. Okay, but if the learner is kind of doing the course every day, one byte every day, one click every day, then every day a new session is created and new charges are made. So it varies, but we kind of did a very high level cost analysis. Okay, and it was so exciting that like it's way much cheaper than you would do a face-to-face course or any other platform, because the return of investment in terms of like quick learning is very important, and reference back is there. In terms of the language, the course content itself, language is local language, any local language with Unicode script. Okay, but the AI content is primarily in languages which right now, it's not supporting too many African language. It supports Swahili. We have done some pilots and we have done some validations in Swahili. It supports most of the Indian languages. It supports Spanish, and these are the languages which we have tested. Okay, but we are still exploring some other options for other languages like Chichawe or other languages for Malawi or Eastern Africa, and of course French is supported.
Thank you. We have a question online. Ben, can you read the question, please?
So there's a question online from Christian Binik. Is the ICT for ARC learning network open to NAS to initiate and facilitate their own COP around working as a NAS, that's innovation system? So this is a question to Satis. The question is the ICT for ARC learning network open to the NAS?
Yes, a big yes. But anyone, as I said, like anybody who's having content and wants to reach out to the farmers, a big yes. We are just an enabler. We are just a platform enabler. That's all.
Are we, any other kind of quick comments? Yes, yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you so much. My name is Rachel Zuzu. I work for society. So my question to Benjamin about the sustainability, much about the countries, because they're the owners, even if you're operating at the regional level. I'd like to know more about this ownership by countries, and also how this platform is being used, the good practice, how you are disseminating the best practices emanating from this platform. For Satish, we are in Africa, and we don't use much of, we are behind, if I can say, in terms of digital technology and accessibility, availability, the internet and everything. So how is this really fit within the African context due to these challenges? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes. So in terms of the first one, sustainability, that is actually very key. And that is why our approach is not to be developing platforms that are better done by other people. We rather provide the space for people that are doing innovative things in the field to be known by the stakeholders. So we use our large network to promote. So when you go to even the data informs, the FARA data informs, you will notice that there are so many platforms there, but many of them are not managed by us. They are managed through, maybe it's been a platform maybe implemented by, let's say, Calro, and it's very good. So we make it available, easy access by other stakeholders across the continent. And it scales down that we're using the knowledge management community of practice. So funding, to some extent, yes, we need funding for some of the key things. And so we continue to work on the value add of the platform so that we can maybe attract some collaboration and some funding from stakeholders. For now, we are able to manage them, but at least as we continue to add value, we believe that we would be able to form alive. We have also integrated these whole processes within our strategies. So the basic management of the platforms would continue to exist within the organization's strategies. So it won't go down. Maybe what may happen is we be unable to build on it because there's no money, but the access will continue to be for those that. The second one actually on the countries. And that's why if you look at our architecture, we have FARA plays more of providing the cross learning where something is happening in East Africa. The West Africans are able to have access to it through that continental platform. But at the sub-regional level, they also focus more on the countries. And that's why even in our capacity development for the knowledge management, we have built over 28 national research institutes, capacity certified individuals as knowledge management practitioners. And they are working with us in the scaling of these innovation processes. AFAS has been working very closely with the farmers, but also there are some of our initiatives that are focused on the last mile, like the innovation platforms and agribusiness portal, which we collaborate with TAT on. These are platforms that are very much directed at the last mile. Through TAT, also the Technologies for African Agriculture Transformation, a number of the technologies generated by the CGs are available on this platform for access. We've translated them into a more accessible format for access. And this is also within the FARA data informs. I think these are the key areas. I don't know if I missed something. Thank you.
Just quickly, Satish.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of penetration of mobile, especially in terms of WhatsApp in Africa, is bit, as you said, like it's behind, but I think it's not staying there. It's kind of progressing. So I think we have to embrace that. That's one thing. And in terms of, I mean, this is a conversation I had with somebody who is very much rooted in Africa. Okay, the person said like, the people who really need skills in Africa, people who are coming back from the urban cities back to their home to start farming, and they are the people who really need. And if you're getting them, and if you're kind of teaching them, that's a good start. Okay, and people who have been there for long time who are still not using, they might be people who know agriculture better. I mean, I'm not saying that's the thing, but yeah, I mean, it's behind, but it's fast catching up. And we are also targeting the extension workers as the key who might have.
Andrea, do you have anything to add from some of the questions or comments or reflections that you've seen?
Well, yeah, maybe say digital, again, it's not a red button, but it's also not banned, right? So we need to really understand each local need to kind of what we call customize. So in some cases we have WhatsApp, but as we have AI now, what we do is using AI in the back end, do prepare whatever content you need. And after that, you can channel that whatever. So it can be WhatsApp, but it can also be IVR, but it can, there is a huge opportunity now that we have large language models to actually prepare the content and translate, as I was saying, and be able to channel that through whatever is available.
Okay, excellent. I think we're going to leave the presentations for there and we'll come back to them, but we're going to have a bit of a panel discussion to reflect on this as well. So again, once a good hand for the presentation of the regional level down to the national level, researchers and actors, and then down to really getting to farmers. So we see these levels and how they maybe work together. And I think our panel will give us a bit of representation around that as well. So we're not going to bring everyone up to the front. We'll have people stand where they are because it's very hard. Peter, you're going to need to find yeah, maybe Peter, you come up here. So you have a microphone, and yeah, Matthew. So I'd like to quickly introduce our panel. Yeah. Peter, you want to come here? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay, great. There we go. So we have, we'd like to welcome Soumya Swaminathan, who's from the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, as our panelist. Let's give her a round of applause. Oh, okay. And well, I'll then move to you. Thank you for, that was a easy miss, but it's Matt Manning from Dev Global, not Global Dev. And we have another mistake there I'll make in a second, but mention. Thank you. Let's give him a hand. We also welcome Peter, who has worked for many years and is the originator of CG Space at ILRI about 2010, I think, and working with ILRI in the CGIAR. And we have now Boniface doesn't work for Calro anymore, but he used to work for Calro and really, at the national level, and is now a consultant working on many different projects, World Bank and others. So Boniface Okuku. I'm going to switch up the questions that we made because we don't have that much time, but Soumya, I mean, you've seen now, I mean, it would be interesting to hear from you, your reflections on how effective do you think these digital applications are for farmers and getting down and really supporting farmers? What do you think are some of the opportunities and the gaps?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'd like to congratulate all the three speakers, really excellent presentations and a lot of food for thought. So at the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, we basically believe in a very participatory approach to this kind of solutions development. And so I think that really helps. Yesterday during the plenary, I mentioned a couple of apps that we have, especially the fisher-friendly mobile app. It was developed with Qualcomm and in partnership with INCOIS, which is the Indian National Agency for Coastal Information Services. And the interesting thing is that it's gone through 54 iterations over the last 10 years or so, all based on the needs of the fishermen. And sometimes the needs of state governments or of other stakeholders. And so it's been improved over a period of time. And it's had a lot of use. It's all 9 languages, coastal languages in India. And I think the reason for its success basically has been that element of co-creation, feedback, and continuous improvement. So I think any of these learning modules cannot be static. Now we've tried to do the same with farmers, small farmers, and we always include them in all of our scientific meetings and panel discussions and everything. And they're very clear and very concrete about their needs. And like everyone said, they're usually very contextual, depending on what kind of farmer they are, where they are, et cetera, et cetera. I think with climate change, really, there is a need for very, very focused and contextual information and timely information. I think AI can play a role as well, because they really need to know. And I think there's already been some experience in India with moving the sowing dates because of the heat, early heat that's now been experienced over the last few years. So if you don't sow the wheat in time, then you're going to be stuck with this problem of sudden increase in heat towards the end, and that affects your crop. So I think moving the cropping cycle back by a couple of weeks based on predictions of weather is an example of a very concrete and useful input for the farmer. So we've had these weather, one other thing, and that is a platform called the Echo platform that I don't know if, how many of you have heard of it. Because I'm a medical doctor, I'm familiar with it. It was basically set up by a friend in the University of Alabama, University of he's in New Mexico, so it's Albuquerque. Yes, so it's basically to democratize knowledge, specialist knowledge, and it was done. It's a telementoring platform, essentially uses a Zoom, but essentially it's a two-way communication. It was done for healthcare providers. So if I'm a specialist in liver, and I have a lot of primary healthcare doctors who really don't know how to manage sort of advanced liver disease, and the patient suffers as a result, right? The patient is waiting and waiting to get an appointment with the specialist. So through this platform, I can now train several hundred primary healthcare doctors or nurses to do the same quality of care that I would do as an expert over a period of time, not in one session or two, but over a period of time. And so through that, you're actually improving health outcomes. So it's a way of empowering the healthcare providers. So I think these platforms also can be targeted to extension workers. Very often, they don't get the mentorship and support. And through the building capacity of extension workers, it's like teacher training, right? You ultimately improve educational outcomes. So you could have the direct outreach to farmers, but I think you could also do the route of working through the intermediaries or even other kinds of workers who are available there. And then you can have separate trainings for veterinary, for fisheries, for and so on. So I think there are endless opportunities, and we should also monitor, evaluate the effectiveness of these, because there are any number of these platforms out there. And so how do you know which one works better? Does WhatsApp work better? Does Zoom work better? In different countries, it's going to be very different. And thanks to AI now, I think the language in India, we have a very big program called the Bhashini program, supported by the government of India, that's going to use AI to translate into all Indian languages and dialects. And that's going to be a big, game changer for us. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Okay, great. Yeah, Matthew, it sounds like you want to jump in here.
Well, yesterday I heard Andy on the stage, Jarvis from ASOS was talking about, and he said that keep it simple. And I want to keep it simple for this question. And that is, we need to bring the farmer here with us. Right? When you think about it, think about this week when we're here at CG Science Week, how many speakers on the stage, how many researchers and scientists, how many people across our centers are here. But if you want to get these things to the farmers and you want to get them to the next generation, you got to have them here in the room.
His name eludes me now, from Summit, would say the same thing, get it to the farmer. Borlaug, yeah, Norman Borlaug. I blanked out for a second, but I think that really fits in with what your father and Norman Borlaug would say. Peter, just coming to you, from a knowledge management perspective, how do you see some of these, these three different platforms and ideas that you've seen? What is some of your experiences, and what are some of the recommendations you might have for them?
Thanks, Michael. Thanks. Nice to be here, everybody. So really good. I replicate the congratulations for the speakers. Very nice. We started off at the very beginning. There was, I think, Ram said something like, what KM is on the up. And then I wondered what he meant by KM. And he said, KM is about co-creating. And I think as a scientist, that's probably what KM is. Yeah. But Dr. Salim also talked a little bit from the extension side. And I think it's also about the application, the assimilation, the adoption of the knowledge. Yeah. So KM is not just about creating; it's about the learning. And a few years ago, Michael, we worked together on a project where we talked about social learning. Yeah. So I think we should be thinking a little bit. It's not just co-creating. A lot of people love to co-create, but it's the learning, it's the loops, it's the interactions. And I think what I heard here was, in a very simple way, there's a kind of a creating by scientists, and there's people who are learning. There's a kind of an enabling piece in the middle. Yeah, and then we heard very nice here examples of that. And I don't know where Benjamin is, but it's really, really great to see what's coming out from, I can't pronounce your new thing, the RRRV, whatever that thing is. It's very nice in this kind of enabling, it's curating, it's adding value, it's assimilating, it's aggregating, it's facilitating all of these different things. So I really like that. A couple of thoughts. We hate silos. But you know, if you go to villages or even to the US, they have huge silos and they serve a really useful purpose in agriculture. But we hate silos. But I don't mind. I mean, I think they're like safe, protected, high quality. They keep bugs out. They're very good. But you don't want, in our world, we don't want them disconnected. So that interoperability, the connections. So I don't mind silos. We've been doing a lot of knowledge management at the CGIAR. And one of our worries is that we just focus on quantity and we don't pay enough attention to quality, context, users, and all those things. A couple of other just random thoughts. Tariffs are very much in the news these days. And for knowledge, and a long time ago, the World Bank produced a World Development Report on knowledge, in 1988, something like that, where they said that knowledge, the value of knowledge does not decrease when it's shared or consumed. So for me, one of the really valuable things from all this is reducing. We want tariff-free knowledge sharing. And I'm really, really happy to see from our colleagues here that we're gonna have free access to all of that African free. I shouldn't maybe free. I don't know. We still have to spend a bit of time on it to get to the knowledge. So that, you know, the tariff-free. I love that. Let's keep the knowledge tariffs down. And this is a fantastic initiative there. And the last thought is, a long time ago, I'm an old guy, so I have a lot of old stuff. There was a share fair, knowledge share fair at FAO, I don't know, late 90s, something like that. And we had a tree of knowledge and people wrote leaves. It was a nice participatory thing, yeah? And somebody wrote, knowledge is not power, sharing is power. And I think we should remember that in this world here. Managing is great. And nowadays, when we have tariffs, we like to put up barriers and keep our silos safe. The sharing is the power, not having the thing. That's just my thoughts. Was there one last thing here? No, that was more or less where I am, Mike. I don't know, it's rather generic, but I'm really, really pleased to see all this. There are indeed loads of interesting collaborations and platforms and things, and I've been involved in lots of those. So it's nice to see there's still lots of innovation and experimentation. Nice to see that from the CIMIC colleagues. Yeah, so super.
And just to say, I think, you know, some of this started when, you know, the speaker said a bit older than some of us, but started in 2006-07, where a lot of people were doing ICT for KM, very small projects in CGIAR with partners. And it is really interesting to see how it evolved. Let's just go to Boniface really quickly. How do you see this from the perspective, particularly at the national level? Do you see how do you see the opportunities for Calro, other NARCs, and some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you.
And how do we get it scaled into the World Bank too?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks the presenters. And I'm glad that the fire is going on, seeing Benjamin here started a long time ago with the team here. Satish here, we're working closely. So I think what I want to say is that what I see here is that I think the challenge that the national institution has is that they have a mandate to ensure that all this science end up in the farm and also with the stakeholders. So the challenge has been, how does this end up in the farm? And I think that's been echoed around. So, but the challenge has been that it's a capacity to be able to, and I think all this, all we're seeing here is the difference on creating capacities, enabling capacities for the national institution to leverage on to ensure that all that they are mandated to do is fulfilled. Take example of what FARA is doing.
FARA is actually becoming just an enabler, enable the national institution, give you a framework or an environmental platform that you can be able to make sure that all this knowledge is available. Because the three problems that the national institutions are struggling with is the knowledge available. Available here means it's not in somebody's head or somebody's computer or somebody's flash disk or somebody's laptop. We have a problem with scientists. They like to keeping the knowledge either in their head or in the flash disk or in the laptop. If you go to a place called Meru, you will find farmyard manure along the roadside. But if you try to pick the farmyard manure, the owner will come. But the wind can come and go with it. The water can come and go with it. The same way, scientists are keeping knowledge in their head, in their flash, in their lap, but the virus can come and go with it. The hackers can come and go with it. But what we are seeing here now, all this effort is making the knowledge available. So availability is the first problem that this is sorting for the national institution. The second problem is availability does not translate to accessibility. You can make it available, but is it accessible? And accessibility, what I'm seeing here is that understanding the context, understanding the capacity of the different users. Those who can go to the portal and access it, you make a portal available for them. Those who cannot, you turn into WhatsApp, you turn them to chatbots, you turn them into local languages. So I'm seeing a lot of effort helping the national institution in accessibility in terms of context. The third problem is usability, because accessibility does not translate to usability. Is it usable? And what I'm seeing here is it's actually kind of contextualizing this thing, making them personally relevant to the different use, the different context. So I'm seeing a lot of effort there. So I want to conclude by saying that what the science is facing today, both national and even the CG, the funding is going down. And the reason why the fund is going down, the question is, what has science done? How have we translated science to impact? And today, if you send a proposal that you want to do another research, funding is actually, there's a lot of strenuous. But if you say that you want to take research to the ground, you'll get a lot of attention. So I would like to say that to the people here, knowledge is not like wine. I've never taken wine, but I'm told that if you dig wine and put it in the soil, with the time it becomes sweeter. That's what I'm told. I've never taken wine. But knowledge does not become sweeter by hiding it. It becomes sweeter by exposing it. That's what I want to end it with.
That's great. I love that one. We've had some great quotes here. And we definitely hands off, no more tariffs, I think is what we have to be saying. Just really quickly, so while we're waiting, we usually have a reflection where one person summarizes everything. I think in the spirit of not just co-design or co-creation, but co-learning. We do have the Menti up. Let's hear what everybody else has to think about. What's your main takeaway from today? So please put that up. But I'd like to go around and ask each of the panelists just very quickly, 10, 15 seconds at the most. What's your main, what's one or two actions that you think CGIAR and its partners, particularly the caught up XP4 partnership and others, really need to take this and get this to the farmers, make it accessible, make it sweeter, and really make sure that we're having power by sharing, as Peter said. So Sumia, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think the best thing is like what's been coming up repeatedly, partnerships. You need local partners, could be NGOs or other kinds of organizations, could even be farmer producing organizations or companies that want to take this and disseminate it, but also do the feedback and use that. Somebody should be actually, you have to have somebody who's managing this as well, because it can't just be automatic, because there's a lot of feedback that would need to be incorporated. But yeah, so I think CG will not be able to reach, I think, all the farmers that you want to. So you have to have that intermediate layer of NGOs who then have broad outreach. So I think it's a cascading kind of a thing. So have these large knowledge consortia maybe in every country.
Okay. Create those partnerships to go. Yeah, Matthew?
Thank you. So I think the biggest thing that comes to my mind with all this change in the world, in the space that we're in, is about staying relevant at this point. I think that there's a lot of change and turmoil around us right now. And I think over the last decade of working with the CG, realizing that your data and content, they're gold for you. They have so much value to the world. And if you get your knowledge management right and your ability to share that with the world, I think that you guys will stay relevant and will be able to operate. The next one is impact. I think a lot of times there's such a focus on the research, but there's some people right now that need something done. We need to have some urgency to realize that there's real lives on the line, and we can't wait for the research sometimes. We just have to get to the impact and actually save people's lives. And Dr. Bergmanson, who I've supported off and on over the last decade, whether it be at the Gates Foundation or ICRSAT, when we used to travel around the world together and talk about digital agriculture when it was launched, we always finished with the same thing, and that's to do it with urgency. I think we need to be on with urgency because there's so much going on right now that we can't wait anymore. We have to be urgent to solve these problems together.
Excellent. Peter?
Couple of things. When Synergies was asked a question at the very end, something about can anybody use his platform? And he said, if you want to reach out, yes, reach in. I think don't reach out, only reach in. And we need to be listening. And the CG talks about listening a lot. So we need to look very clever. It's really about pull, not push. With partnerships, we can. Forget science, it's partnership.
Not just science, partnerships. There we go. Okay, Boniface.
Okay, I think I want to say that what the CG need to take home is that I know you have been told and how you are graded and salary increased is how many publications you have published. So there's been a say that publish or perish, but I want to say impact or perish. And how do I achieve this? Be obsessed by pain points. What are the pain points that need to be solved with knowledge? And when you get obsessed with pain points, then you're going to stimulate demand because you're going to come up with solutions and apps and tools and knowledge, services and products that are actually demanded. And therefore, you will have a greater impact. Most cases, research is remote from practice. Can we bridge the gap between research and practice? Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause for the panel. I wanted to see, we don't have too many takeaways. One thing that I was thinking of, and maybe we'll hear from one or two others takeaways. But yeah, one of the things I was thinking of is, it's kind of about this management of information. We used to talk a lot about, okay, we'll collect all the information and then we'll share it. And now you start to see all these apps, WhatsApp, it's great to seeing a lot of collaborative tools being used to really kind of get the information out there. So, and allow it to get out there in a way that we're not kind of controlling, but that's being used and really kind of evolving in a different way. So I think information, but really type to facilitate or broker some reactions. Before we end, Dr. Salim, it would be great to get one or two comments from you and the extensionist. So, and I've had usually a lot of fights, when we talk about research extension, I think extensionists have a different mindset and a different way of thinking. So it'd be really good to hear from you and what you think is some takeaways and some actions for the research institutes and for CGIAR and its partners.
Thank you very much. I was looking at my ED to speak first, but he's handing over to me. So for me, I think I'll start from where he left. Bridging the gap between science and practice. As we develop our technologies, so as we develop the innovation and the products that we are developing,
one key thing that I keep asking, who are we developing for? She needs, and once we get it, we'll be able to develop products that are relevant. We'll be able to develop products that are accessible. Even as we make them accessible and available, they'll be usable. Because it seems sometimes we may make them accessible, we may make them available, but they are not needed. But once we bridge that gap, and that's where extension comes in. How do you work close with the researcher and the farmer? And I was quite impressed with one of the presenters, it's from CIMMYT, how they engage the whole link together in designing what is happening. Once we do that, I think that is the success to knowledge sharing, knowledge, information capturing, and all this that we are talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you very much. In respect to ICT digitalization and knowledge management, we are in a current world whereby technology is ever changing. Anyone who does not embrace digitalization or ICT will be left behind. To be able to improve our farming systems and reach, we need to use all the various tools. Industry 4.0 has 8 pillars, but the core pillars of Industry 4.0, one of them is data. Out of all